Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Ramsha podcast. Joining us today is Juhie Faheem, a licensed clinical psychotherapist with over 7 years of experience in mental health and emotional well being. She has worked extensively with individuals, couples, and families using compassionate and inclusive approach to address trauma, anxiety and depression. So if you're curious about mental health, depression, emotional resilience or just the journey of overcoming trauma, then this episode is for you. Stay tuned. Thank you so much, Juhi, for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you. How are
Yeah.
you doing?
Thank you, Ramsha, for having me. I'm doing well. Doing great.
Awesome. This is gonna be the episode
Mhm.
because I mean I think mental health as a topic it's really important to address, and yes, we are talking about it, but I
Mhm.
think we need to have more discussions around it. And I'm really excited to hear your approach towards it and how you work with your patients and how
Mhm.
you worked with the community. So yes, tell me about your childhood, right? Tell me about your family, your
Mhm.
upbringing.
Oh yeah. Well, let's get right into it. My childhood was a very interesting one. I would say it's very different from most people in our culture.
Yeah.
I was born in a very entertainment environment, so my parents were in the entertainment business.
Wow.
Wasn't coming from a typical doctor, lawyer, engineer family. They were creatives.
That's so refreshing.
Yeah. um, my parents had a radio show, like the first South Asian radio show in the country. They were one
Wow.
of the first promoters, bringing different artists from overseas to perform. I grew up on stage more than I grew up like on a playground or, doing what the typical kids were doing. And, coming from that background, there are ups and downs. I was moving around a lot, changing from different environments every couple of years. Eventually, we did shift. I grew up in Texas. We shifted from Texas to Chicago, completely different environment. And what I noticed, I think, was how many stereotypes there are because there's such a massive amount of different types of cultures in Chicago. Like Chicago's like a big melting pot, versus where I grew up in Texas, there weren't that many of people from different cultural backgrounds. So we all were just one group of friends. There here in Chicago, when I came here, it was very much like you're a South Asian, you're Hispanic, you're a white. So
Yeah.
very different groups. And yeah, it was definitely an adjustment. I would say, you know, your child has a huge impact on who you become, and mine definitely had an impact on, where I'm at today.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Mhm.
tell me more about, you do a lot of things, right? But
Mhm.
let's talk about you as a psychotherapist.
Yeah,
Why did you decide to get into this
become a
career
therapist.
path? What was the
Yeah.
reason?
So being South Asian, there
Yeah.
are so many things that I personally questioned.
Yeah.
I think when you're South Asian, questioning can come across as being rude, or just disrespectful.
Yeah.
But for me as a child, I was just curious and I was always wondering why. So if I was asked to do something or if I wasn't allowed to do something, I would ask why. I want
That's
to know what's
bold.
the thought behind this.
Yeah.
So it wasn't to be rude, but it's just to understand what I'm being told a little bit better.
Yeah.
Um, and there were experiences that I've been through in my childhood that I would characterize as traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And so, because of those experiences, I wanted to get to know a little bit more as to why certain people behave certain ways. And that is why I decided to study psychology.
Wow.
Mhm.
No, that is really interesting. You mentioned that as a child you would question why behind things, why behind
Yeah.
certain events, and I think in our society, for the most part,
Mhm.
it's not considered too good or positive when a
Yeah.
child is questioning things. It's like, okay, we told you to do this,
Mhm.
you have to follow this because
Right.
that's how it's been always done.
Yep.
Did you ever experienced such such things where people
Mhm.
told you, like especially the adults in the
Yeah.
family, that this is just how it's done and you have to do it in this way?
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's
Yeah.
that's what you it's exactly as you explained it. They would say, "Oh, just because I'm telling you to do this, just do it." And
Yeah.
again, I would ask, "Well, why?" And I see the difference now between how children are being raised now compared to how we were raised. Now parents are learning, yeah, you should explain to your child versus just scolding them immediately. You know, scold them,
Exactly.
but explain why. Or like when you are asking them to do something, if they have a question, just explain to them because they're just curious. They just want to know. And I think growing up, that's not something our parents understood very well.
Yeah.
So it's just like you said, like when you're being told to do something, you should just do it, no questions asked.
So when you saw or when you heard a lot of adults or families, kind of getting angry at you
Mhm.
for questioning things, how did you respond to that as a child?
As a child, I was very rude. I will have
Oh,
to say. I mean, I would get angry, right? You're
yeah,
a child, you don't have an understanding, nor do you have a control over your emotional responses, right?
yeah,
So, as a child, it's normal to respond in a very angry way or come off as rude or to, you know, throw a tantrum, and I did.
yeah.
Because again, I saw it as you're not listening to me. I'm not being heard. And
Mm-hmm.
so my reaction would be one of anger as a child. Obviously, now that I've gotten older
Yeah.
and I've learned, it's not my response now.
So you specialized in trauma,
Hmm.
anxiety, and depression, right? Um, if you were to explain these terms to a 5-year-old
Hmm.
kid or a 7-year-old kid, what would you say to them? How would you break these concepts down for them?
You know, I think each person has to be approached in a very customized manner.
Yeah.
So you do have to see not every 5 or 7 year old is going to be exactly the same or on the same like wavelength of progression in the developmental skills. So I usually look at the child and see where they're at. With trauma, I usually explain it the same way I would explain to a 5 year old. I kind of explain it the same way to an adult because the term is not very well known. The way I explain trauma is that any experience or event that you've gone through that has caused you to feel upset or hurt in any way, or has caused you to feel a little bit different than you normally would. When that event is experienced or mentioned, if you start to feel scared, nervous, afraid, upset, then we can look at that event and see if it was traumatic to you. So I kind of explain it the same way to an adult just to get them comfortable with what the term is. Because I think a lot of people don't understand is they may have gone through a traumatic experience, but they don't understand that that's what that was.
And I think a lot of it also comes from the fact that, most of the people are not comfortable talking about mental health. It's
Hmm.
changing
Yeah.
now, but are not comfortable talking about mental health in front of their parents or
Hmm.
their older siblings, because
Yeah.
there's this misconception, I call it, that
Hmm.
if you are struggling mentally, then just go out, have fun,
Yeah.
and just pray, and just get out of that zone.
Hmm.
But it's never really told that it's important to see a doctor, a
Yeah.
therapist, right? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just want to avoid such conversations.
Yeah. And I also think all the things you mentioned before, those are all valid, great things to do. Like get out more, do something. If you sit there, you're probably not going to feel that well. But, you know, most people aren't comfortable explaining or expressing to themselves what's going on, let alone a parent or a sibling or a family member, right? Like most people will not even to themselves say like I'm hurting. That admitting that is hard to most people. So I think when you start to get in touch with your own emotions and understand what you're feeling and why, then you can take the steps to then either talk to someone else about it, whether it be a family member or a professional. And yeah, I do think in our culture, it's not that common. It is becoming a little bit better now, but growing up, it hasn't been to speak to someone about getting therapy.
You just mentioned, and I think that's such a valid point, that it's hard to accept yourself that
Hmm.
you're struggling and you need help, right?
Yeah.
So how does one recognize that they are in need of help, and now is the time that they should get professional advice?
Well, I think time-wise, there's no wrong time. It's never too late and it's never too early. I have clients like who are very young children, right? Who are
Yeah.
just like, I don't like the way that I'm expressing an emotion, or I don't like the way that I'm not able to explain how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
So even starting at a really young age, therapy is just a way for you to understand the way you work better. right? So if you start young, you'll just grow those skills early on. And if you start later on in life, then you'll be able to change the things you don't like about yourselves and develop the skills that you would like to become mentally and emotionally healthy. I think when you feel like your reactions or your feelings are causing harm in your life, whether it's personally, your harm to yourself, harm with your social groups or your family groups, your school, your work, if you see that something you are doing or something you're feeling is causing harm to you in any of those aspects, that's a good sign that maybe you should talk to someone about what you're feeling or experiencing.
And what advice would you give to someone who they know that they need help, right? But
Mm-hmm.
they're hesitant. And there can be different reasons, family pressure
Yeah.
or, just peer pressure. So
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give to someone who is hesitant about
About
seeking?
therapy?
Yeah.
The way I like to explain therapy is similar to like a bodily injury. So imagine you hurt your leg or your arm and you're going to go to get PT for it, right? You go to physical
Yes.
therapy. I describe mental health as a type of PT because
Mm-hmm.
mental health comes from your brain, your heart, your emotions. That's also PT. Physical therapy can also be psychotherapy,
Yeah.
right? So if you're going through something emotionally and you just need to talk to someone to help you work it out,
Yeah.
to help you understand your feelings better or your thoughts more clear,
Yeah.
then a therapist would be great. The way I like to also explain it is not just therapy is good for understanding yourself better, but I kind of describe it as writing in a diary. So in
Yeah.
your diary, you have those pages, you write to yourself, you
Yeah.
close it, you're done. Therapy, you're basically speaking to a person versus writing in a diary. The difference is they're speaking back to you. It's still a private space. It's still your own private, comfortable space, right? And so I always say just give it a chance. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, give it another chance because it is something new. And like anything new, once like riding a bike, like once you fall off, get back on, try it again. I say therapy is the same way. And therapy or therapists are not one size fit all. So it's also important to do your research before going to a therapist as well.
I was reading somewhere that therapy is like finding a date for
Mm-hmm.
yourself, like dating someone,
Yeah.
because I
You
don't
have
know
to find
how.
your match.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because not every therapist you're gonna talk to will
Right.
be the ideal
Mm-hmm.
therapist, right? You have to kind of talk to different people and see that, okay, that maybe this is the person who is like the ideal
Yeah.
match for me, right? How do you find an ideal therapist?
So that's a really good question because I do get that question a lot. My number one kind of like go-to easy response is check with your insurance if you have insurance.
That's
The
so
easiest thing to
valid.
do,
Yeah.
let's say you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? It's
Yeah.
very common in Chicago. Go to their website
Okay.
and sign yourself up. So many people have insurance, but they don't actually have a profile with their insurance
Mm.
carrier. So let's say you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, sign up on their website, make yourself a profile, and you'll be able to type in the search engine therapists. It'll pull up so many different therapists that are covered under your insurance. You can look those therapists up to kind of narrow it down more towards what your needs are. And then the second step is figure out what your need is if you're able to. Like, let's say you're dealing with depression or anxiety, you can look at therapists who specialize in that specifically. So now I found my five, maybe I started with 10, right? I have five who specialize in depression and anxiety. Now, let's say I want a therapist who is South Asian.
Yeah.
I can look up a South Asian therapist or a person of color if I'm more comfortable with that. And then you can also see sometimes people will write in their profiles what kind of clientele they specialize in. So let's say therapist one specializes in 18 and up, adolescents, young adults that have experiences with depression, anxiety, school troubles, career problems, things like that, and they're South Asian, boom, you can schedule your appointment. Another thing I would say is understand that just as you are new to your therapist is new to you too,
So to be
right?
patient.
So be patient because just you don't know them, they don't know you. And it does take 1 to 3 meetings sometimes to build a little bit of rapport and build a little bit of comfort
Yeah.
so that they can understand how to adjust their way of working with you as they get to know you a little bit better.
No, that's That's a great answer because,
Hmm.
I talk to a lot of people, a lot of my friends, and including myself, there's always this confusion that, okay,
Yeah.
yes, we need therapy, but
Hmm.
how do we go about it? And I think you've just perfectly laid
Hmm.
out all the steps.
Yeah.
Um, Julia, I want to talk to you about something really
Hmm.
interesting. This has been going on in my mind lately. I see a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, they're scared to invest emotionally and mentally in
Hmm.
relationships,
Hmm.
right? And that's where the whole idea of situationship comes
Yeah.
from also, that
Absolutely.
people, they want the pleasure, but they don't want the commitment and the responsibility,
Hmm.
and that's why they're like scared to invest in those relationships
Yeah.
emotionally and mentally. Do you think a lot of that is part of that, a lot of like unsaid and unhealed trauma? Like, what can trigger this emotion?
Again, it's never going to be a one size fit all answer,
Right,
right?
yeah.
But for some people, it is an unresolved trauma. And again, trauma can mean a multitude of things. Trauma is different for every single person, right? Sometimes we think of trauma and we think, okay, abuse or violence, which is very true. But for others, trauma can be a difficult relationship they
Yeah,
experienced. Trauma can be struggles at work and, having a tough situation with your last job or not having a great relationship with your parents or your family
yeah,
members, and you're bringing that trouble into your relationship or situationship. So if someone's experiencing struggles in their relationship, they're not able to maybe commit, they do have to ask themselves, like, what is it that's holding them back?
yeah,
And really, again, talk to yourself to see what's holding you back. And if you think that you're not able to come up with an answer on your own, I do think talking to a therapist will help because they will help you kind of break down what's going on in here. Sometimes there's so much. So
yeah.
they help
You're
you kind
just
of take out the
overwhelmed.
noise and kind of just dwindle it down till you can find out the things that maybe are hard for you to focus on your own.
No, that's a very valid point, that it's important to question that, okay, what is holding you back from
Hmm.
taking that step?
Yeah.
So, I talk to a lot of people, and like a lot
Hmm.
of my friends, and they're always saying that, it can be difficult to sometimes accept what's holding you back from
Absolutely.
committing, or like you mentioned that maybe a lot of that trauma comes from seeing abuse between your parents,
Hmm.
or child abuse or domestic violence, and it can be very difficult to confront your parents,
Yeah.
and it's almost like putting a fight with them, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so what do you have to say
But I
about
think
that?
it's also hard to confront yourself for a lot of people.
Right.
I think all of it genuinely it goes back to you, right? I don't believe that enough people really want to confront, the things they may struggle with
Yeah.
or they may lack. It could be communication skills, comprehension skills,
Mm-hmm.
empathy. Like there's so many things that we have to develop as individuals to be healthy in all the relationships that we engage in. So it's so hard to sit down with yourself and say, what am I missing or what am I lacking or what do I need to improve on? It's much easier, right, to point a finger at someone else.
Yeah.
But there is a saying, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but um, in our culture, but it's when you point one finger at one person, there's four pointing or three or four pointing
Exactly.
back at you, right?
Yeah.
So it's so hard for most people to sit down and say, what can I improve on? And I think when you start to do that, it's difficult, but you'll learn so many more things about yourself that maybe you didn't know from before. That will help you with other relationships.
So you mentioned about, communication
Mhm.
skills and comprehension skills, like understanding where the
Yeah.
other person is coming from. I could be wrong, and
Mhm.
correct me if I am wrong. I personally feel that even though social media and all these social
Yeah.
platforms have opened up a lot of ways for us to stay connected with people, but somehow it has also drifted us apart from ourselves and from
Yeah.
people around us, because now everything is just virtual meetings,
Mhm.
Zoom meetings. As much as I love Zoom, but I
Mhm.
also see some of the downsides of it. One more thing that I notice is, when we go to events or parties,
Mhm.
a lot of our attention goes towards capturing those moments and
Yeah.
making reels and not actually interacting with people one
Mhm.
on one.
Mhm.
Do you think that is something that has led to that decline in mental
Oh,
health and
absolutely. I mean, social media has so many things going on with it. And there's so much that we as social media users absorb
yeah,
knowingly and unknowingly, right? And a lot of times, if we see what our friends are up to on a
yeah,
day-to-day basis, in that moment, mentally, you're kind of like, oh, I caught up with them. So then when
yeah,
you see them in person, what most people kind of either don't know what to say, haven't been able to practice their social skills because they're so used to not speaking to people in person,
right.
or they're kind of like, oh, I already know what's going on in your life, so what should I ask you? I think social media can, you know, be blamed for that a little bit. And I do think that it has caused a lot of people to struggle in developing those social skills or maintaining them as
Yeah,
well as they did beforehand. So again, if you're recognizing that and you're like, I kind of don't know how to talk to people anymore.
yeah.
That's great. You recognize it. That's the first step. You recognize it. Now it's like, what can I do to work on this? Or what can I do to improve? Um, and there's lots of things you can do for that.
Like what?
So for me personally, I realized sometimes when I'm on my phone in like a party or an event, I'm not engaging with the people in front of me. I'm just on my phone, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm taking a picture, like you said, I'm taking a video. I will try to just put my phone away.
Oh,
I will try to put my phone
yes.
away if I'm
Yes.
out and about. I have two phones, so I have social media on one, and like one's
That's
just for
so
calls.
smart.
But I know not everyone has that. So when I did have one phone, I just try to put it away. Sometimes I try leaving it in the car.
That's so
Or what I
smart.
will do, which is kind of annoying, but again, you have to customize the approach for you, is I will just delete it. Like
You'll
just
delete the
delete the app. If
apps.
I'm going somewhere, I'm doing something, delete my Instagram because I need to be present in the moment. And that's specifically for me because I realized I was spending so much time in social environments, but not actually being present. So that's one thing I would say is put your phone away. If you're as bad as me, delete the app completely. But also, yeah, just understand what your needs are in that moment. Understand why are you coming to that environment and be more intentional, be more genuine with your actions.
Yeah, and I think sometimes a lot of us we know what's good for us,
Hmm.
but it takes a lot
Oh,
of
it's hard.
courage and
Hmm.
pushing yourself to be able to finally do the right
Yeah.
thing. But I think once you do it in that moment, then it can be less challenging to
Yeah.
sustain.
And I always suggest setting yourself for smaller, achievable goals. Don't,
Smart goals.
have these smart goals and small, like just such small, achievable goals that if you're able to do just that one small thing, okay, I can add to this. I can take it a next step further the next time around. An example of that can easily be, like you said, let's say you know what you need to improve on, but you're just struggling with that step. Let's take the example of going to a social event, right? You know you need to be better at socializing with your friends. You struggle to kind of make it there. If that is your goal to just make it there, let that be the goal. Forget what's
Mm,
happening once you're there. But your goal can just be, I want to at least make it to that space, push myself out of my comfort zone to make
yeah.
it to that space, and then tell yourself that that was your goal. Because you're going to feel good about it, right? You're going to be like, oh,
Mm,
I did something that was challenging for me, or I didn't feel comfortable doing it, but I made it there. And then give yourself grace. For the rest of the time you're there,
mm,
give yourself grace. You're human, you're experiencing things. There's so much else going on in your life that is impacting you knowingly or knowingly, or I'm sorry, knowingly or unknowingly. And especially as we get older, there's just so much going on. So I do think we have to give ourselves a little bit more grace.
no, I like that because um I personally I make this whole to-do list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Big plans, a lot of goals,
Mm-hmm.
and then soon after I just get overwhelmed and then
It's a
nothing
lot.
really ends up happening the way
Right.
I would want it to happen. So I think a lot of it is also just about simplifying the process and
Mm-hmm.
like you said creating small actionable goals
Yeah.
for yourself and just like once you have but once you meet those
Mm-hmm.
goals then just breathe,
Just
stop.
breathe. Just enjoy it. You did that one step. If you
Yeah.
decide, okay, I'm here now, I want to maybe talk to one or two people. do that. Understand that that wasn't your
Yeah.
goal. That's just an extra add-on that you're trying to
That's a
do.
bonus.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
reward yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
we have to give ourselves rewards and kind of, you know, praise ourselves when we accomplish things
Yeah.
that can be hard for us.
You know, I personally feel that we usually go for a therapy when we feel that something is wrong, something is off, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
When you're causing harm to yourself or other people around you. But I also feel that in today's day and age, when there's so much going on, there's so many things going on, it's important to seek therapy even if you feel that you are doing okay, because what's wrong with having a therapist and really
Yeah.
opening up to them about what you're going through, and it can be something really small. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, right? When you write in your diary or your journal,
Right.
the reason we suggest that you should journal is because everything you're experiencing kind of stays within you. So the physical expression of that, like the physical act of writing it down, you're bringing all the energy that you've been harboring all day, you're putting it out onto something else. You're
Yeah.
transferring that energy, right? And it's good. It's healing. It's going to help you relax, wind down, and not have everything just in your head because that can overwhelm you over time. Similarly, the same kind of approach applies to therapy. It's just another way to physically express what's going on in here. Whether that's good or bad, even if everything's fine, it's a good way of maintaining what's going right for you. And sometimes, even in that process, when you speak with your therapist, they can help you understand if there are healthy patterns you're engaging in, negative patterns you're engaging in, or negative ways of thinking, or healthy ways of thinking. So it's just good maintenance overall, even if you're doing fine, to continue with your therapy and not just abruptly stop because everything is good.
So now I want to talk about this narrative that exists. It's like log kya kahenge, right? What will people say?
Yeah.
For instance, if you go to a therapist or you go to a psychiatrist, right? There's this perception that they will I either give you like a shock therapy, or they'll give you medications, or they'll have that pep talk with you, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone has a different approach, and depending on what you are going through. And the perception is that if they give you medications, it's gonna impact the way you function day to day. It will affect your life and your basic daily
Yeah.
functions. And then eventually you're gonna get addicted to those medicines, and you're gonna go crazy.
Okay.
That's one perception,
Okay.
which I call it a misconception. I don't agree with this, and I tell you why. See, when someone has a heart condition, right, or they have a kidney failure or anything, it's actually encouraged that you go see a doctor, and you
Right.
you take medications, and you do whatever you have to do to get healed. And they also know the fact that, okay, if you take medications for a heart condition, it will affect your daily
Yeah, there's side
functions. And
effects to
yeah,
everything.
every medicine has side effects. So if you're seeing that heart condition a certain way, that it's completely okay to go to a doctor and
Yeah.
get the treatment and get the medications, right? Why can't we treat mental health the same way? When your mind, your brain, if that's not okay, how will you do anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a point that I explain a lot to parents or even any client really is like
Yeah.
your brain is the biggest, you know, muscle in your body. It is in charge of making sure everything else is working fine, right? If that is not working fine, how is it going to help the rest of your body function, right? So it's so important to make sure you're mentally healthy. And I know a lot of people struggle with the idea of medication, but like you said, if you're having a heart problem or kidney problem and kind of holistic methods or your natural methods aren't working for you, they will prescribe you medication, and it's to help you. Similarly with psychotherapy and psychiatric medications, they're not there to harm you. They are there to help you with symptoms you're experiencing that maybe therapy alone is not helping you get through. And with medication, it also is a little bit of a trial and error too. Some
Yeah.
medications will not work for everyone. And
Yeah.
you have to kind of figure out what the right mix is for you or the right kind of medications and make sure that your psychotropic medication isn't clashing with something you're already taking.
Yeah.
And so that's another point is just to make sure you're keeping up to date with your doctor visits. And yeah, people can be afraid, but like you said, it is just the same thing as any physical ailment.
No, that is really valid, to get professional help and to see what medications are working for you or not. It's not just like you continue taking a medication
Yeah.
and just bearing the side effects, right?
Right. And we will never, jump to medication right away.
Right.
No therapist will ever say immediately, okay, you're going to be put on medication. And I know that is a fear for many people that I see,
Yeah.
especially many families and parents. Like they worry and they think, oh, you're going to be put on medication. And it's never the first approach. It's always kind of like the last to middle resort if we feel like the traditional psychotherapy isn't working as strongly as it would as if you combined, psychotherapy and medication together.
No, that is really valid, and that brings me to my next point is that a lot of us, especially us in our 20s and 30s and even 40s, right? We are very like there's a lot of
Self-critical.
like analyzing. We just feel that we're not good enough, or that we can do better, and it's just a lot of like self analyzation, being really critical of yourself. And there are also times when you just decide that I can't do this, like this is not for me, right? So when you speak to like your clients who are feeling a similar way, where they're feeling that they just can't do something because either they're too old, or they just don't have it in them, how do you change that dialogue that's within their minds?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to work with anyone that's feeling that way over time to change the dialogue. It's never kind of like a one and done type of session, which is also like I think a misconception with therapy is people
Yeah.
think I'm going to go, they're going to fix me and I'm going to leave. But
Yeah.
no, they don't, again, they don't know you. They don't know your background, your history, and we take all of that into account when we're, speaking with our clients and helping them understand themselves better. So we have to all kind of take our time with the client. But I also love to just help them break down everything that they've experienced to lead them to this point where they feel super self-critical, and ask them like why, what's going on to make them feel that way. I also like to always say it's never too late. We have this idea if it's too late, like you mentioned, like, oh, I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, it's too late to accomplish this dream of mine. It's too late to, do this job or learn this skill or this talent or pursue this passion project. It's never too late.
I know, that's so.
We're going to be working, most of us, for the rest of our lives,
Yeah,
right? And the life that you have lived is still much less than the life you have yet to live. So you have
that's
to
true.
understand that. Like the life you have lived, and I don't mean like since you've been born, because that's when you were born and you were a child, really truly doesn't count, right?
Yeah,
But the
you don't know
life
anything.
you've lived so far is still less than the life you have yet to live. So remind yourself there is still so much time to go, and you might as well spend the time that you have remaining and then some, enjoying what you're doing, loving what you're doing, and being happy that you chose to pursue those paths, and you didn't allow this concept of not having enough time or being too old for something to stop you.
That is so valid, because I hear from a lot of people, like these people, these girls especially, they're just like 18, 19,
Yeah,
20,
so
and
young.
they're like, you know my life is over. One bad
Right.
relationship, one professional setback, and my life is over. I just can't do it. And then there's all that pressure coming from family,
Yeah.
for the most part, that you need to graduate by a certain age, you need to find a partner by a certain age, you need to have kids by a certain
Yeah.
age. And I find that to be so toxic, because I'm like, everyone has their own journey
Yeah.
and destiny, and everyone is coming from a different path. And it's just so obvious that all of us cannot have that linear path that, okay,
Right.
graduate by the age of 22,
Absolutely.
find someone before you turn 30. I mean, I just find that very unreasonable. But
It is.
sometimes
Yeah.
it can be hard to explain people that.
It is absolutely unreasonable, and it is one aspect, I think, of our culture. Not all aspects are toxic. Our culture has both beautiful
Yeah.
things and some negative things.
Yeah.
I do think right now it's a very hot topic of South Asian culture being toxic. And when I see videos such as that, I'm like, it's good and bad.
Yeah.
With any culture, there's good and bad. And if we didn't have the bad, we would not be able to appreciate the good, right? Um, there is a toxic mindset, though, in most South Asian families
Yeah.
of being married by a certain age, being done with school by a certain age, and like I said, you're going to be doing life for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So why put limits on ourselves?
Yeah.
It's good to have goals, but if you don't reach your goal, don't let that stop you from continuing to try.
Yeah.
Um, especially like I can be, an example. I'm in my 30s. I'm not married. I'm not getting married anytime soon. And I think,
That's amazing.
yeah, I would have loved to, but
Yeah.
again, I'm like, well, I'm going to continue on this path that I have laid for myself. And when something is meant to be, it'll be.
Yeah.
But all you can do is truly just try your hardest. Everything else is really not in your
You
control.
can't stop living your life, right?
Yeah,
Because you,
because of an age deadline,
yeah,
right? You can't. You should still be happy no matter what and understand that, you've tried your best. Not everything is in your hands. Some things are out of your control. And I think being comfortable in accepting that sometimes there's this gray area that we have to be in is really important.
so I'm going to talk about another negative that exists, and I promise you will get to the
Mhm.
positive aspects of the
Yeah.
Asian culture too. There's something that really upsets me. It's a saying that "mard ko dard nahi hota,"
Mm.
that men don't feel pain.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro,
Everyone
every
feels
human,
pain. We're all
yeah,
human. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And I think that's just so problematic
Mhm.
because if you look at the two genders, right? If you're telling
Yeah.
men that you have to be like very tough and you have to be like very strong and you
Mhm.
can't show your emotions, and then you're telling women to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
to be sensitive. I think that's a wrong teaching
Yeah.
because men and women are like supposed to be partners. They can work together,
Right.
they can do things together, and it's important that both of them at times they show emotions, they show
Yeah.
that they're sensitive,
Mhm.
while also at times put that strong face forward.
Right.
So why are we like just,
Why don't we change that?
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I do see nowadays, I see a bigger push in changing that. I see a lot more South Asian men actually who are looking into
mhm.
therapy than I see women. Kind of,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
women are like,
Wow.
well, we already knew about therapy, we'll find it. But I do see a higher number of men nowadays
Yeah.
asking about therapy, asking questions about it, or engaging in it because of the statement that you made that mard ko dard nahi hota. But we're all human, men and women. Feelings don't change depending on your gender, right? A man experiences sadness, a woman experiences sadness, that it's still sadness, right? And I think our culture, unfortunately, has, for the most part, done this, played this role of making a lot of men feel that they can't
Show
show
emotions.
emotion, can't be vulnerable, they can't cry, right? I see that all the time of like, men don't cry. Why not? Why not?
What's wrong with
What's
it?
wrong with crying? Because you still need to express how you feel. No one is saying cry all the time, but
Yeah.
like cry when you feel like crying, laugh when you
Just
feel like
don't
laughing. Just
like hold
feel and
it.
express. Don't hold it
Yeah.
in. If you're holding your feelings in, again, they're staying there. They're not disappearing. And they're going to show up in other ways or in other atmospheres. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong
Mm.
about this because, see, I really like this discussion because
Mm.
I am learning a lot of things on my own, and
Yeah.
it's a way for me to also kind of clarify, few
Mhm.
things. I believe that your mental health, for the most part, it gets affected,
Mhm.
either first that you're not happy professionally,
Mhm.
you feel stuck in a certain job or in a career, or second, it can get drastically affected if you're not happy in your personal life. Like, let's say you have grown up seeing abuse, or you're getting abused, or you're just not really at peace personally.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? And I also like, there's a second part to this question,
Mhm.
that I feel that for most people it can be easy to overcome or maybe change their career paths for the most part, but when it comes to um just dealing with your family,
Yeah.
sometimes they're like, we have no choice, because how do we fight with our
Right.
parents? How do we go against them? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and it's important to understand that certain things that are in your control will be easier to change,
Okay.
right? So changing your career path, that's in your hands. For the most part, it's in your hands. So you're able to make that decision of, I want to do a different job. I want to do something else. I want to go somewhere else. So those things, because they're in our control, it's easier for us to change them. Other people are not in our control, right? So your
That's
family's mental health, your family's way of viewing things, it's not in your control. So that's where it becomes difficult, because no matter how much work I'm doing on myself, if I'm going back to that same environment or interacting with those same people who haven't done that work,
Yeah.
they can't meet me where I'm at.
So what do you
They
do in
physically
that
can't.
situation? That's tough.
It's a tough situation to be in,
Yeah.
absolutely, because you're like, you're not understanding where I'm at. But in that situation, it's important to remind yourself that like, they're not where you're at. Kind of explain to yourself, they can't meet you where you're at. They can't understand where you're coming from because they're not there. They haven't actually done the work. So I do think we often forget that our families, our parents, they're also human. They also
Yeah.
have had difficult upbringings. They also have not been, told that they can express their feelings or their emotions or get help. So we can't expect them to be at our level when we're the ones getting help and they're not, right? And if we're struggling with that, if I'm like, why isn't my mom understanding? Because she's not able to. It's sometimes as simple as that. She hasn't learned. So give her, or give your mom or dad, give them grace, give them some empathy, and try to explain yourself in a way that makes sense to them. Try to speak their language, right? Especially because it is so hard. As you get older, you kind of get stuck in your ways.
Yeah.
And our parents are much older. They've been practicing that mindset, that way of thinking or feeling for so long. It's not easy for them to change or understand where you're at. So try to speak to them in a way that makes sense to them as well.
Is that mostly the love language? Because I see a lot of people saying that, oh, just leave them, just rebel, just fight. And I personally think that
Yeah.
it's not a good approach.
Right.
Um, because they're your
They're your
parents
parents.
after all.
You only have one mom and one dad.
Yeah, you
Once they're
cannot get
gone,
another
you
mom and
cannot get another
dad.
mom and
You
dad.
can't replace
Can't
them.
replace them. You can't go back in time. They're only here for a limited amount of time. So this is an emotional topic, but that's why I'm like, if you walk away, most people will say that, right? So if you go to like a non-South Asian therapist, sometimes I see a lot of my clients
Yes.
complaining about
Yes.
this. Is they're like, my non-South Asian therapist told me to, you know, draw a boundary, and my parents don't understand the word boundary. Like, what, they're not going to understand what I'm saying, and I can't just walk away or leave them because, again, in our culture, our parents mean so much, as they should.
Yeah.
And so, I do think, again, don't expect a solution to come overnight. By little, just try to approach them with empathy, with love, with understanding. And little by little, they're going to start to feel understood too. And they're going to start to change. And you're going to see it, but it will take some
It
time.
will take time. And how important is financial independence in this case, especially for women?
Oh, it's always important. I mean, being financially independent is important in any case, right?
Hmm.
Especially nowadays, you just never know what's going to happen with you, with your families, your loved ones. So that is definitely something to focus on. If you do have it, It's easier sometimes than when you don't have it and you're stuck being with them. Um, but I do think a lot of people forget, like, you don't have more than one family. And there may be unhealthy patterns in it, but work through it. It takes time, but work through it if you can. And I understand that's not applicable to everybody's family situation.
Now I'm gonna come to a little controversial
Mhm.
question, but I really want to talk about this.
Okay.
Um, a lot of people, especially the religious scholars, and
Okay.
they say that, oh, if you're not doing well mentally, get closer to your religion.
Mhm.
Connect with God,
Okay.
pray more. And I see where they're coming from, and you find a lot of peace in doing that.
Right.
But at the same time, I feel that that's not the only thing that you can do, or that you should do, or
Mhm.
rely upon, right? um what do you have to say about that?
Believe that we are not just one-dimensional as people, right?
Yeah.
We are multidimensional people. There are so many different things going on with us, and different activities will help heal you in different ways.
Yeah.
When our family tells us to go seek God or speak to a scholar, know that the scholars probably aren't going to tell you this is the only way either.
Yeah.
They'll encourage you to pray because they believe that it's going to help you in a positive way.
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you to do something because they believe it's going to harm you. And many people take part in praying. And just the act of praying is what's helpful. So it doesn't matter really what you're saying, what you're praying, right? But just the actual physical act can be healing to someone. And um, that along with other things. You have to look at what you're experiencing. You can't just say, I'm going to pray and make that's just going to help with everything else. No. Are you physically okay? Like, are you in good shape? Are you eating right? Are you drinking your water? Medically, are you okay? Do you have all your vitamins? And all these things are connected to us as people, right? We're not just a thing. Your brain, your body, your heart, all of it's connected. And so, what are you doing to ensure that all those parts of you are functioning well together? That could be spending 5 minutes to pray in the morning, eating breakfast, going for a run, reading. All of these things have to be combined to help you. It can't just be just the praying, right?
You have to
We
strike a
have
balance.
to strike a balance, and balance is key to everything. And we do often say, like, you should practice mindfulness, you should practice gratitude and
Yeah.
um, yoga. And yoga is a type of, again, a physical act of being in a quiet, comfortable space and just checking in with oneself, whether you're speaking to a higher being or just the energies around you.
And I often see that
Mm.
most of the times, again, I'm not trying to make like that
Yeah.
statement, but most of the times women tend to face more burnout
Mhm.
than men. And I personally feel that that comes from the fact that as women we're taught to just give, give, give,
Mhm.
and prioritize other people's happiness and well-being over our own, right? Like, if I talk about my mom, for instance, right, she does everything to make sure that me and my dad and our family, we're doing well, and we are healthy, fit, and fine. But she places herself like
At the end.
at the end,
Yeah.
and that is very problematic. And that's just not my mom. It's like all of
That's
our
moms. That's
that's
moms.
moms,
Hard
right?
job.
Yeah. um I feel that it's wrong, because if you're keeping yourself at the end,
Mhm.
eventually you're just gonna end up losing yourself completely,
Mhm.
and you just won't be able to be there with your family, which is like a loss situation for you and
Yeah.
everyone around
Mhm.
you. But now I see that gradually it's changing, with like a lot of new moms, a lot of like new like a lot of women becoming moms. But then again, there's this feedback that comes that, oh, you're just too selfish for prioritizing yourself and your physical and mental health,
Mhm.
right? So like, what do you have to say about that, and how do you like navigate through
Yeah.
that situation?
Well, I will say that I don't believe necessarily that women experience more burnout than men. I think it's two different types of burnouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's two different types. They're two different people.
Yeah.
And men might experience burnout in a different way than women do, right?
Right.
They're both doing different things, and so I don't necessarily think, yeah, women experience more burnout than men, but I do think moms do have a lot of responsibility on their
Yeah.
shoulder and
Yeah.
tend to take on more than maybe their partner does
Yeah.
in that relationship. And like you mentioned, you have to take care of yourself first, especially if you are a caretaker. If you don't take care of your own mental well-being, your emotional well-being, and your physical well-being, you're not going to be able to be a good caretaker for those that you're responsible for, right?
Yeah.
You'll experience burnout, you'll be tired, irritable, and you won't be able to put your best foot forward for those that you may be caring for. So it is always important to care for yourself. And it can be hard being a mom. So even just thinking of one or two things in your day that are for you can be really helpful.
What if you were to give like a, not gonna call it a therapy
Uh-huh.
session, but just like a talk session, right now, what are the three pieces of advice that you'll give to someone struggling with their mental health, not having family support or support from friends? What should they do and how should they go about it?
Yeah, I mean, oh, that's a loaded question. Um,
You, I said three, you can give four.
I mean, I'm trying to think of just a few, but yeah, I believe if you're struggling with your mental health, ask yourself what are the resources that are available to you that feel accessible in the moment. And that changes depending on who you are, where you're at, and what your environment looks like. But that could even be your phone. Right? What's something that's easily and accessible to you? It could be your phone, right?
Yeah,
And watching something that's going to bring you some happiness, some motivation. Listening to music helps a lot of people when they're
yeah,
experiencing, a really tough time, listening to songs that bring them joy and happiness and
yeah,
evoke positive feelings inside of them. That's a really quick and easy way to feel better. Um, and then if you really do want to get help, like you don't have friends, you don't have family to speak with, look into speaking with a therapist, look into speaking with a counselor, or, even a natural support that's already in your environment, who you feel safe and comfortable with, at least expressing what you're going through so then they can help and assist you with other, resources. And then ask yourself what brings you joy. Like truly, what brings you joy, what brings you peace, and what makes you feel good inside. And make a list of those things and then challenge yourself to try to do at least one of those things. And it can be very small. It can be something as small as like, okay, I feel joy when I feel healthy.
yeah. Mm.
Drink your glass, drink some water. Don't even forget about
Just
eight.
do it.
Just forget about eight glasses.
Just do it.
Just drink a little bit. Or I feel joy when I'm moving. Go for a walk.
Yeah,
Even, a 10, 15-minute walk outside in sunlight can boost endorphins and make you feel better and
yeah,
then bring some positive energy inside of you to then help you take that next step,
yeah,
whatever it may be.
yeah.
Start small, make it manageable, achievable, and take it day by day, truly.
I love this. I truly, truly love uh, having this discussion with you. I think you have hit like spot on with all the points that it's really about just not really comparing yourself with other people, because everyone is coming from a different
Everyone has different
place.
resources, and
Everyone has different
I'm just trying to
resources.
make it realistic. That's the number
Yeah,
one thing is I'm trying to provide realistic advice and information. It's
yeah,
very easy to give you like textbook examples and like
yeah,
a this is what you should do, but realistically, are we going to do it? Where
yeah.
if we're not even feeling that good, probably not.
It's different for different people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking to you, and I think that people watching this episode will find a lot of value in this, because you were just so honest and genuine with all the information that you give. So it was a pleasure having you here.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
for
for your
having me. I
time.
know it's a very deep topic that we can go on for hours.
Oh
So
yeah.
I appreciate being here. And I hope, even if someone takes away with one thing that will help them or one thing that makes sense to them, then, we did good.
Well, thank you so
Thank you.
much.